Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We start a press conference on the 5th anniversary of Crimea's reunification with Russia. We have Russian First DPR, Ambassador Dmitry Polyanskiy. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Theodore. I welcome. Is it on now? Yeah. Can you hear me? Great. Great. I still need to master this thing, you know. It's not the same as in the Security Council. I welcome everybody here, and I'm very glad to organize this press conference devoted to the 5th anniversary of the reunification of Crimean Peninsula with Russia. I understand that there can be different interpretation of this event. It depends on which optics you choose for this. We choose very optimistic optics. We say that 5 years ago we managed to save more than 2 million people from the fate that now you see on the example of people of Donbass. There is a lot of information about the fact that allegedly this whole situation was calculated in advance, that Russia had certain plans to annex, as they put it, Crimea, that this was all premeditated. But I was the witness of these events 5 years ago. I was working in foreign ministry, and I remember how confused we all were about the information that was coming about the consequences of the Maidan coup in Kiev, the threats that people of Crimea received, threats to their lives, not only to their existence as a peninsula. And the Russian leadership had to react very quickly. And looking back at 5 years' time, we can say that we do not regret the way it was done and the outcome of what has happened. I have a lot of information and figures here in this green file. I will open it if you need it, but I don't know what kind of information is more interesting to you. As you might know, on Friday there was an Area Formula Security Council meeting devoted to Crimea. Again, you can raise questions about the names of this area meeting. It was not the optics that we choose, but the outcome was quite okay for us because we managed again to present our position to the whole world. We have nothing to be ashamed of. We have a lot of things to be proud of. During last 3 days, there are festivities in Crimea and in the rest of Russia. Today, my president visited Crimea. If I'm not mistaken, it happened for the 20th time during these 5 years, so there is a very big attention towards this region of Russian Federation. The reason for his coming here was not only participation in the festivities, but also the formal opening of 2 power stations which rendered Crimea absolutely independent energy-wise from Ukraine. We had big problems with this in 2014, when in the fall of this year there was an attempt of Ukraine to disrupt the flow of energy to the peninsula, and there was a total blackout, and we had to think of emergency measures to provide basic supplies to the people of Crimea. They managed to survive this difficult period, and now they are not only energy independent, but they are capable of exporting energy to some southern regions of Russia. The same about water. It's a more difficult problem because geologically, Crimean Peninsula is a very difficult one for the exploration of water resources, but we also are solving this issue quite quickly. Same about transport blockade. You know that since the end of 2014, Ukraine limits very much the crossing of de facto border with Russian Federation in Crimea, in the northern part of Crimea. And if you are a foreigner, and even if you hold Russian visa, you will not be allowed to enter Crimean Peninsula from the north. The only way you can do it is from Russia. For Ukrainians, still until now, there are no limitations. And last year, there was a record flow of Ukrainians. According to our statistics, about 1 million people came to Crimea, of total of 6.5 million tourists, which is a record for this peninsula, and it is comparable to the best Soviet times of tourist industry in this region. So this is an absolutely open region. We have absolutely nothing to conceal or to hide. Everybody is welcome there. There are a lot of journalists, a lot of foreign delegations, those who are not afraid to come there, afraid not because they will be harassed or, I don't know, arrested in Crimea, but because they will be finger-pointed in Western media saying that they bowed to pressure from Russia or they Russian agents or so on and so forth. But people are coming, and there are absolutely no restrictions on visiting of Crimea. Whoever you are, journalist, politician, businessman, there are a lot of expats living there. Though people of Crimean Peninsula de facto face kind of visa isolation, because a lot of Western countries, including these host countries, simply try to claim that these people do not exist. They don't want to issue visas for them. They tell us very scary fairy tales about what's happening there. I devoted a large part of my intervention on Friday to these fairy tales. So, again, I'm here, I'm open to your questions. I'm not sure what would be most interesting to you. That's why maybe I will stop at this point, and I will, with pleasure, take your questions about concrete issues. Yes?
Thanks, Ambassador. Michelle Nichols from Reuters. The GA passed a resolution on this at the time, and 100 countries voted in favour of it. And a lot of those countries, and the resolution, I guess, accused Russia of basically violating Ukraine's sovereignty. How do you think this, does this affect Russia's defensive sovereignty here at the UN when you're talking about other situations such as Venezuela?
Well, I don't think this is linked in any regard with the Venezuela issue. At least I myself do not see such a link. I would say
it's not necessarily a link. It's more that you're accused of violating Ukraine's sovereignty, and yet Russia is a staunch defender of sovereignty here at the UN in situations like Venezuela.
You know, it's a very tricky issue because, again, it is and it will be a topic of study for different scholars about what has happened there. In order to understand this, you need to follow this situation a bit in retrospective. So you need to see what happened at the beginning of the 90s. At the beginning of the 90s, as you know well, of course, this is a common knowledge that Khrushchev gave Crimea to Ukraine for certain reasons that I don't want to cite now, which was not a popular decision at this time. But for people, it was not a very big difference when you lived in USSR, where you lived, in Crimea, in Russia, in Ukraine. Same was applicable to Abkhazia and Georgia, for example. It was really very formal, and people didn't very much feel attached to Ukraine when they lived in Crimea. It was more administrative arrangement. But of course, when the breakout of Soviet Union came onto agenda, this was a painful issue, and there were a couple of referendums in Crimea, which consequently the Ukrainian authorities ignored. I touched upon this issue again during my intervention during the ARIA formula meeting. The first referendum was, first of all, I need to say that in March 1991, there was a referendum where all the citizens of the Soviet Union were asked, all the republics were asked the question, do you want the dissolution of the Soviet Union or do you want to continue within Soviet Union? And the overwhelming results, with the exception of, I think, Baltic states, Georgia maybe, which didn't participate, if I'm not mistaken, the overwhelming support was in favor of preservation of the Soviet Union. It's one thing. The other thing that the voters in Crimea, approximately at this time, also held a referendum where they voted in favor of the restoration of autonomous of Crimean Autonomous Soviet Republic. The status of this republic would be the hierarchy would be under Moscow directly, not under Crimea, not under Ukraine. So the voters clearly showed that in these turbulent times they wanted to secure themselves within a certain entity which was allowed by Soviet constitution at this time. When the independent Ukraine was created, there was another referendum in Crimea, and the majority of people there voted in favor of autonomous status of this peninsula, which they had during the Soviet times. But the Ukrainian leadership ignored this since the very beginning and absolutely made no reference to the desire of people of Crimea to have kind of autonomy. They also cancelled the post of president of Crimea, which was decided by this referendum. So there, if you come back to this time, you will see that there were a lot of irregularities at the moment when Crimea became part of Ukraine. We didn't object this because, well, times were like this and we wanted to have very good neighborly relations with Ukraine. But I am saying this only to show that the people of this peninsula always were trying to retain kind of autonomy, kind of independence, and they were very much inclined towards Russia. And this was the fact that was ignored by Ukraine for many, many years. So what happened in 2014? In 2014, the right of nations for self-determination prevailed. And you can't analyze this situation in general terms. I mean, all these situations, they are all different. You can cite the situation in Kosovo, for example, which is, I think, very, very, very much comparable, because in Kosovo also there was no consent of Belgrade to the situation that happened afterwards, and the Western powers defended and defend until now the right of Kosovo Albanian people to self-determination. But they do not apply this right to Crimea. And in Crimea, there was a referendum that was organized. Some people, and I'm sure that a lot of those present in this hall, will also say that, well, this is a questionable result. But you would see, if you want, from the consequent visits of different people to Crimea, of different opinion polls, you will see that the level of support for the idea of entering the Russian Federation remains more or less the same. It's much above 70%, and it was, according to some polls, close to 90%. The people of Crimea, even now, after the region became part of Russian Federation and had to endure a lot of painful but necessary economic reforms, even now people say that they do not regret this desire. So we are not afraid to show Crimea and to let Crimeans speak to correspondents, to Westerners, to whoever, to tell really what is their position on this case. So we think that you can't ignore the right of Crimean population to this, and we also think that what happened there at this time was also kind of the practical implementation of the policy of prevention, if you want me to put it like this. Because these people were threatened, they were threatened directly. Now, of course, Ukrainian politicians try to forget about this, but we all remember what happened at this time. There were direct threats. There were a lot of nationalists who were trying to penetrate the borders of the peninsula. And it was absolutely clear that the authorities, the junta that came to power in Kiev, were aiming at kind of cleansing this Russian element from Crimea. They were not ready to accept the fact that the inhabitants of peninsula want to retain their cultural face. They wanted to speak Russian, to continue to speak Russian, to to teach their children Russian. They wanted to worship the heroes that were liberating Ukraine from fascists and not those who were collaborating with the Nazis. So the requirements were very simple, but it's a matter of principle. Now, if you look at the rest of Ukraine, you will see that these principles of Maidan, they prevail and they are being imposed on the population. And that is the main problem of ethnic tensions within Ukraine. So, looking back, people of Crimea and all of us, we think that we did absolutely the right thing to save the life of these people and to ensure their right to be who they are, Russian-speaking populations. They were loyal citizens of Ukraine, but they became threatened after the Maidan coup. And what was done was really a very necessary move. And again, we do not regret this move.
So just to clarify, it doesn't undermine Russia's defensive sovereignty?
It doesn't undermine our position on any other issues, because all issues are particular, and you can't speak about general rule about such situations. You need to examine all of them in their detail and in concrete circumstances.
Thank you very much. My name is Erol Avdovic, Web Publica Press and some other Western Balkan media. Ambassador, you mentioned that this situation with Crimea is similar with Kosovo somehow. On the other hand, your position is known not only in the Security Council, but broadly that you are not supporting independent Kosovo. At the same time, do you recognize some other similarity, or would you accept that if Volt and the United States and the European Union somehow, which I doubt they will, but to be turned in that direction to silently at least allow you to go with this annexation of Crimea, whatever you call it, that you would accept also the independence of Kosovo in any possibility? Thank you.
I think I was maybe misunderstood, but I didn't say that these cases were similar and that the reasons were similar. I think that they can be compared I wanted to analyze it mostly through the different reaction of our Western colleagues. That on the one hand they were supportive of this move from the point of view of Kosovars, but were not supportive of what happened in Crimea. There are a lot of different things about Crimea and Kosovo, of course. I don't remember that there was a referendum, for example, in Kosovo, in any case. A referendum on Kosovo about this? About the independence. I don't remember. Maybe I'm mistaken, of course, but I'm not. maybe we both are mistaken. It happens. But again, in Crimea, the situation was totally different. You take different situations when it's a question of right of peoples to self-determination, and you will see that the recipe for tackling this issue can be different in each and in each case. So there is no general rule towards this. That's why I wouldn't speculate on the theoretic opportunity. How would we react to the change of position of our Western partners? It happened what it happened. For us, the status of Crimea within the Russian Federation is absolutely clear. It's irreversible. At the same time, we absolutely respect the position of our Serbian colleagues. We think that what happened in Kosovo was total breach of sovereignty of Yugoslavia with force as well. So our position is absolutely different there.
Research. You mentioned that you were taken by surprise by the events in Ukraine, but in 1997, in his book, The Grand Chessboard, Mr. Brzezinski stated that it was absolutely imperative for the West to separate Ukraine from Russia and to isolate Russia. Can you comment upon the authority of the West in deciding the future of Russia's relation with Ukraine? And secondly, there was an organization called World Without Nazism, which was not permitted into Ukraine when Mr. Yushchenko was president. When Mr. Yanukovych was, they were permitted into Ukraine. And it's my understanding that Victoria Nuland and her colleagues very aggressively put into office a government that was sympathetic to the Nazis. To what extent did the Ukrainians resent this? And just as a follow-up, you mentioned that power had been cut by the Ukrainians to the people in Crimea. And since a comparison was made to Venezuela, I was wondering, could you comment about the possibility that the power could have been cut to Venezuela by another country?
I see that today the audience is very much inclined to see similarities in different cases. I wouldn't speculate about the situation with power cuts in Venezuela. There should be, of course, investigation, and we should determine the origins and the reasons for what has happened. But I would comment on other idea that you spoke about the role of the West in the events in Ukraine. We really, as you know, we always say that the so-called Maidan events, or the Revolution of Dignity, as the Ukrainians put it, was very much influenced, to put it mildly, by the West. And there are more and more proofs about this. There are a lot of circumstances about this that are very vague, and they are not being investigated. What happened in Maidan? What was the role of Viktor Yanukovych? How did this coup took place? It is all kind of out of interest for the West. They claim that this was a power, that this was a popular uprising against Yanukovych, and that everything is clear for them. It is absolutely not clear for us. And what we see now, to a large extent, is really repercussions of what happened during this terrible time. And you were absolutely right when you pointed out that there is a very huge growth of extremism and fascism in Ukraine, which is also worrying for us. And it was the starting point for the whole situation in Crimea, around Crimea, and in Donbass. The fact that there were nationalists coming to power in Ukraine, which still are in power, and there are a lot of neo-Nazi elements, which the West doesn't want to see as such. And these people started to threaten their former compatriots. They wanted to create the situation, kind of Ukraine über alles. And there were regions, especially with Russian-speaking population, which tried to resist this move. That's why the existence and the support that the extremist and right elements are gaining in Ukraine is still a very, very important factor in the whole relations between Russia and Ukraine. It is a very big stumbling block that does not allow those in Ukraine who really understand that Russia and Ukraine are good neighbors and they should continue to be good neighbors. Stumbling block that they can't step over, and they have to act along the same lines as they're acting right now. And we're very much worried to see that our Western colleagues are supportive of these elements, try to ignore the extremist nature of these elements in Ukraine. It's very strange for us because this is kind of a time bomb in the center of Europe. I always ask my Polish colleagues how do they tolerate, actually, for example, the existence of the state that worships Bandera and other Ukrainian nationalists who killed hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians, Jews, and Russians during the Second World War. How do they tolerate them in power? I worked in Poland for 3 years. I know how resentful Polish population is towards these fighters, if I can put it this way. And still, there is no reaction from the West. This continues to be a big factor. You see that during the election campaign right now, there are situations when the current President Poroshenko is faced by nationalists and even chased from meetings by nationalists. For us, it seems to be very worrying phenomena. We are neighbors with Ukraine. We, of course, need to bear in mind all the possible developments in this country. But the West seems to be absolutely indifferent towards this. They say that this is all Russian fairy tales and the situation in Ukraine is fine. Well, it is not, and this is very worrying to us. And this is also one of the elements that increases belief of people of Crimea and of Russia that 5 years ago we did the right thing, actually.
Thank you, Ambassador. Question about the upcoming elections in Ukraine. In January, Facebook annulled, I think, 150 or so accounts that it had said appeared to have been involved in the spread of disinformation, similar to activities that were seen ahead of the presidential election in the United States, and they linked these accounts to Russia. Ukrainian officials have also accused Russia of seeking to interfere in some way in the upcoming elections. I'm wondering if you could comment on those accusations. And I know, Russia's often accused the West of interfering in the situation in Ukraine as well. I'm wondering if you have seen similar objectionable activities from the side of the West ahead of these elections.
It's a good question. It's kind of philosophic, but it's about the role of social media and internet as a whole. Internet is an open platform, and we're not afraid of the internet. We're not afraid of the Facebook. I haven't seen so far, maybe you would correct me, but I haven't seen any concrete proofs and opinions that would show that existence of certain accounts on Facebook or Twitter or, I don't know, Instagram influenced to a decisive degree the situation in the United States or in Europe or elsewhere. We also have problems with different accounts on Facebook that are hateful, that are kind of inciting violence. We try to combat these things, but these are the rules of the game. If it's an open platform, then of course there would be people who would try to use this platform for their purposes, but we don't actually. We're not looking for some big state arm that would guide all these accounts. We are not in favor of conspiracy theories. This is all very fictional, I would say. Whereas, for example, if we say about the influence of the West in Ukraine, I can remember the words of, if I'm not mistaken, Victoria Nuland acknowledged by chance that she had in her possession $5 billion for influencing the situation in Ukraine. These are concrete things, you know. We see a lot of interference in internal affairs of other states, direct interference in internal affairs of other states. Again, it's not about Venezuela, but in Venezuela it's not about Facebook. It's about concrete people doing concrete things. So I think that it's very trendy now to really blame everything on Russia. Russia is such a nice scapegoat in the Western societies. If nothing comes out of what you are doing, you just blame it on Russia, and everybody will say, yeah, of course, those bad Russians, they are behind this. There is really a trend to do it in many countries. In this host country, I think it's also very much a trend, which is very worrying. And we don't think that really these publications in social media can be considered to be of such paramount importance for influencing the situation in this or that country. It's kind of, if it's free media, if it's free press, then you should be accepting the opinion of the others, because otherwise it would resemble the situation during the communist times, when there was no free media, no free press. Everybody was advocating the same opinion, and now actually in the West you see that if you don't think along the same lines as the mainstream media does, or the leaders of certain countries do, then it's kind of Russian propaganda.
I think, though, in the context that I'm speaking of, we're not talking about differences of opinion. We're talking about the intentional implanting of false information into the
You mean
open
fake news?
information stream.
You mean fake news?
I've heard it called that before.
Okay, if it's about fake news, well, I can tell you that we, for example, in our foreign ministry, we even have special web page devoted to this fake news against Russia, and there are several dozens of recent publications about this, which can absolutely classify to this fake news criteria, but we do not, I would say, over-exaggerate it. We're not saying that this is kind of state campaign of some country or group of countries against Russia. We understand that, again, I need to repeat it, that this is internet, this is free media, so you should be absolutely ready to opinion of the others. If it's fake, of course, you need to show that it is fake, which we are doing. We can't be responsible for any publication on Facebook or on Twitter. And we do not believe in these conspiracy theories that somewhere people are sitting and clicking mouse and mice and putting these publications on the web. Well, this is worth maybe a nice Hollywood movie, maybe a couple of movies, but not for real life. So we think that it would be nice to live over this illusion and really to deal with things that matter, and there are a lot of challenges that we face. Have I answered your question? Thank you very much.
If I'm not mistaken, we have here a representative of Ukrainian media.
Yeah, sure.
Welcome here, and your question, please.
Thank you a lot for giving me words. The first thing, I have actually two questions. First, how many member states recognize Crimea as a part of Russia? The second question is, why during the last 5 years none of the Russian major businesses, both state and private, expanded to Crimea? Does this indicate that there is an understanding even within the Russian government that the annexation of Crimea is illegal and that the Russian companies do not want to be held accountable for unlawful political decisions?
Thank you for these questions. I'm not sure how many member states recognized Crimea, but frankly speaking, it doesn't matter, because what we did it not for being recognized by the rest of the world. I mean, that this step would be recognized. At the moment when this measure was taken, I think everybody had absolutely no illusions of how it will be viewed in the world. We were absolutely we were understanding that there will be a fierce reaction to this in the West. That very few countries will recognize this move, but this was about saving people's life. First of all, I think that this thing matters much more than kind of recognition. Recognition will come, and it's a matter of time, maybe years, I don't know, but it doesn't matter very much, because people there live. This peninsula thrive, and if you come there, and you are most welcome to come, you will see it with your own eyes. As for the companies that are being represented there, I think that there is such a fear that Western companies, for example, they don't want to be represented there. It's the same as collateral sanctions that the United States imposes on those who cooperate with Iran. Or in other situations like this. So, of course, big businesses, they don't want to be associated with this move, which for them is a bit problematic. Russian or European or American, I don't know. But again, can you imagine that even without such a big participation of foreign business, the peninsula thrives already? Could you imagine what would become of it if and when the situation changes? So it doesn't affect very much the life in the peninsula. It doesn't affect the life of the Crimeans. They understand that international community tries to ignore the fact that they are alive and that they live in Russia and that this was their free choice. But they are already accustomed to this situation. It doesn't very much influence their life. So at some point of time this will change. We are patient. We know that we are doing the right thing. And we are very much keen to continue like this. It's up to international community to make conclusions, not for us.
Let me clarify one thing. If I understand it correctly, so being the member of United Nations, you're still saying what doesn't matter, the point of view of majority of member states of United Nations?
It does matter, of course.
But you said it doesn't matter what is the opinion of and how many countries recognize that.
I said it in the context when it's about people, some person's life. When it is whether this person would be alive or would it be would he or she would burnt alive as he was in Odessa. I think that doesn't matter because these are different things. We chose life, we chose prosperity. Again, we understood that what would be the reaction of international community to this. We have absolutely no illusions about this. But these are incomparable things. Life of people, their right to speak the language that they want and to worship the heroes that they want, and some position of member states of international community. It's not the only situation when international community is not united on what's happening in this or that region. I quoted during the area meeting that since 2014, the level of international support, or I would say the level of interest towards the position of Ukrainian authorities has diminished drastically. So if the first Crimean resolution was supported by, if I'm not mistaken, about 100 countries, during the last resolution that was introduced by Ukraine in autumn this year, it was combined provocative resolution against Russia. There was Crimea, Donbass, Azov, everything else, like Vinaigrette. So this vinaigrette received also some support, but about 127, if I'm not mistaken, countries in this or that form didn't support this idea and this initiative of Ukrainian side. I think it's a clear indication that the support and the interest for Ukrainian position on Crimea is waning. And for us, it's a clear sign. Yeah, thank you for the question.
James Bays from Al Jazeera. I wanted to follow up with something you just said, which is recognition will come. Mm-hmm. Clearly now, the position of this organisation, the United Nations and its agencies, is that Crimea is not part of Russia, it's part of Ukraine. Mm-hmm. Explain to us what difficulties that gives in the governance of Crimea in terms of relations with the United Nations and UN bodies, number one. And number two, what is the strategy of your mission here at the United Nations in order to try and get that recognition? Will you, for example, be going back to the General Assembly any time soon now that 5 years have passed?
May I start from the second question? Actually, we don't have any strategy for this. We don't have any instructions. Go to the General Assembly and fight for recognition of Crimea. Because, people live there. We understand the position of international community. We understand that international community is not ready at this point to change its position. But people live there. Our priority is to give them normal conditions for life, to create a favorable economic environment, to give them the necessary impetus for development. What are the shortcomings for this? Well, there are bilateral sanctions, as you know, but they are so numerous, and some of them are being introduced in advance that we already don't count them. So we've got used to this situation. It's very favorable for our industry, for our agriculture. That's why this issue, it happens somewhere in another reality, I would say. For the United Nations, you see that we interact with all our partners. In the United Nations, it creates absolutely no problems for us for this interaction. It creates, of course, a lot of awkward situation for people in Crimea who live there. For example, if they want to get a Schengen visa, for them, the only possibility to get a Schengen visa would be to go to Kiev and to get it there, which is no way they can do. That's why, either they don't get a Schengen visa or they find some other possibilities how to do it. This is, of course, not the best situation. There are some other things that are not maybe possible to implement so far in Crimea in regards with cooperation with international community. I don't know. Crimean clubs are not playing in our soccer league, which is, of course, deplorable. They want to do it, but, this is not the most difficult situation in the world. At some point of time, they will be playing there, and they train, they get necessary funding. So this is not the most difficult situation. Again, I want to reiterate that these are two different issues. One is life of people, life of Crimean population, their right to become the right to diversity, if I can put it this way. On the other thing, some awkward economic, political, and other situations, which can be really awkward, which can be really annoying, but there is absolutely no choice between the life of a person and some awkward economic or political situation. And that's why I don't think we can put it at the same level of urgency. And I'm sorry, the first issue was?
It was about interaction between
So I answered it. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. A belated welcome on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association. 2 questions. First, it's the negotiations in the various groups on trying to resolve the situation between Ukraine and Russia over eastern Ukraine, Donbass, appeared to be quite stymied, particularly at this point. Is there any hope in Moscow that the results of the upcoming Ukrainian election could make a difference in trying to resolve the dispute between the 2 countries? And secondly, could you give us an update on what's happened with the Ukrainian sailors on the 3 ships and the 3 ships that were seized? I believe it's the Sea of Azov or near there.
Okay, 2 very good questions. Each of them worth maybe a separate press conference. But still, as for the elections, I'm not entitled, of course, and I'm not willing to comment the electoral situation in Ukraine. This is another country, and it's up to Ukraine to hold elections and to elect whoever they want. But of course, we would have hopes to get at the end of these elections in Ukraine some authorities, some personalities which are, first of all, trustworthy, and secondly, with whom we can really discuss our relations. You know that, if I'm not mistaken, on the 1st of April, the treaty of friendship between Ukraine and Russia cedes its legal value on the initiative of Ukrainian side. It was not our initiative. It affects potentially a lot of people. There are a lot of, if I'm not mistaken, 3.5 million of Ukrainian workers in Russia, and their rights are guaranteed by this treaty. So some people in Ukraine right now, they promote such moves which are very detrimental to the well-being of Ukrainians themselves. That's why it's worrying for us. But the question of whether it would help to solve, for example, the issue of Donbass is difficult to say. Because the basic approach of all the candidates seem to be more or less the same. They say that there is allegedly a Russian aggression in the east of Ukraine, and that this is not a domestic problem of Ukrainians, but this is a problem of Ukraine and Russia. We absolutely deny such an approach. There are Minsk agreements, and the republics of Donbass, they are part of this agreement, and we think that the only way to solve these issues would be to have direct dialogue with these authorities. Ambassador Nebenzia, during, I think, a couple of meetings of Security Council, he asked why Security Council is so insistent to see the dialogue of governments of Syria, for example, or Yemen with the rebels, with Houthis, with so-called rebels in Syria. But when it comes to Ukraine, there is absolutely no understanding of the real situation that is happening there. I can also draw your attention to the fact that the recent meeting, I think, on Ukraine, some of them, maybe a couple of months ago, we had the head of Special Monitoring Mission, Mr. Apakan, there in the Security Council, and at the end we asked him a very awkward question for him. After the Ukrainian representative cited again hundreds of Russian tanks, thousands of Russian troops that are coming there, we asked the person who is entitled to supervise all this, do you see any proofs, any reasons to believe in the same way? He was in a very awkward situation. It took him some time to find his senses, I would say, but he gave a very brave answer that he doesn't seem to see all these proofs. And this is the situation. It's very difficult to chase a black cat in the room, in the dark room, especially if there is no black cat. So there is no black cat, and the sooner the Ukrainian leadership understands that in order to implement Minsk agreements, they need to speak with their own people. These are Ukrainians. At the end of Minsk agreements, it is stipulated that these two republics eventually will again become part of Ukraine. But they don't want to. It's more comfortable for them to say that this is a problem between Russia and Ukraine, and it's very easy to explain all the problems of Ukraine because of Russian aggression. It's a very easy position, same as Russians did it, your question. So in Ukraine it is implemented 100%. As for the soldiers, you know our position about this. Well, first of all, this provocation happened, if I'm not mistaken, at the end of November. Yes. It was not. It was meant to be a provocation because they violated the border of the Russian Federation in the zone that was Russian even before the events of 2014. They absolutely knew how such visits, how such sailings to the ports in Azov Sea need to be conducted, because in September there was a convoy of Ukrainian military ships that passed to Mariupol, and there was absolutely no problem, so they knew the procedure. But they deliberately wanted to provoke Russian border guards. It happened in Black Sea, it happened not in Azov Sea. They wanted to enter the Kerch Strait. We have to be vigilant about this because of a lot of threats that we receive from Ukrainian nationalists about the Crimea bridge. So there was no surprise for them when they wanted to enter this region of Azov Sea. And I said, you remember that last Friday there was a daughter of one of the sailors, and she asked me a question, what about her father? Well, as far as I know, there were several medical visits. In January, it was stated that these sailors are absolutely out of any danger. But they violated the state border of the Russian Federation, and that's why we need, of course, to complete the necessary proceedings. We need to find out through the investigation what's the level of their guilt. I assume that it is not the highest level of guilt, because somebody in Kiev or elsewhere gave them this criminal order to enter our territorial waters, to provoke our border guards, and maybe there are a lot of indications that they were meant to be kind of sacrifice. But common sense prevailed, and they surrendered. And they did a very, very right thing. Nevertheless, we need to tackle this situation according to the laws of the Russian Federation. They are treated normally. They are in good health. They don't lack medical attention, medical service. As soon as we complete our internal procedures, their fate will be decided, and I hope that they will have the opportunity to return to their home country. So I don't see any problems about this.
Thank you, Ambassador Betül Yürük with the Turkish news agency Anadolu. Last Friday, the Secretary General issued a statement on Syria expressing concern about the recent clashes in Idlib. And my question is the ceasefire holding?
I desperately tried to find anything related to Crimea in what you were asking, but I didn't. If there is something, just let me know. I really don't want to comment on other issues on Syria or in Idlib. We are all worried by the situation in Idlib, of course, and we all understand how dangerous it is for the whole world and for Syria and the prospects of peaceful settlement there. But again, this is a separate topic, so let's treat it separately, okay? Yes.
Last questions.
Okay, maybe three.
Okay, Maria.
Thank you, Theodore.
So, Maria Hrenova, TASS News Agency. United Nations last week published a report about human rights in Ukraine, and as I understand, there were some parts about human rights violations in Crimea. I wonder if you saw this report, and how did the experts come to these conclusions? Did they visit Crimea? Did you talk to these experts, and how Russia is going to meet these concerns?
Thank you very much for this question. We paid attention to this report, but the problem is that people who try to make conclusions about what's happening in Crimea, they actually don't go to Crimea, and they have information from third biased sources, biased for different reasons. I don't know whether there is political reasoning behind them or personal reasoning. Last Friday during the area formula meeting, I asked everybody who chanced to visit Crimea during last 5 years to raise his or her hand, and there was no one except myself. And it's very difficult to judge about what's happening if you don't go to this territory. We invited everybody to go. The problem is, of course, as it is part of Russian Federation, as we see it, you need to receive Russian visa. And here the problems start. People say we don't want to receive Russian visa because for us it's a part of Ukraine and this would be a violation, blah, 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 blah. But again, you want to do business or what? You want to check the situation in Crimea? You want to speak with the Crimeans? Then go to Crimea. That's the only way to do it. Otherwise, of course, these all reports that we see in different sources, in different reports, in different opinions, they are very questionable, to put it mildly, and we can't trust them. That's why we encourage everybody to go and see through their own eyes what's happening. There might be some problems, I don't know. In every region, in every country, there are a lot of problems, and we don't conceal it. But the general situation is very, very positive, and you would see it when you come down to Crimea. There are a lot of issues there about situation with human rights in the Ukrainian territory, but I would not comment on them again if this is not part of our press conference. But there are more and more indications that the situation is deteriorating. Even through these reports that are very much filtered, you can see that the situation is really very bad. But we get information through other sources, through our relatives, through our friends who still remained in Ukraine, and the situation is not very much encouraging. Okay.
Yeah. Hi, thanks. Since you say Russia is not involved in the conflict in the Donbass region, yet you consistently reject the idea or the possibility of a UN peacekeeping force there. In fact, the U.S. today said you were still rejecting that. So what do you say? Thanks.
Again, it's a proof that we actually maybe live in different reality with the U.S. on many issues, because we do not only not reject the idea of peacekeeping force. The only proposal of the draft resolution in the UN is Russian draft resolution. The problem for us is that there is a Minsk complex of measures that was endorsed by a United Nations Security Council resolution. There are a number of steps, and these steps should be consequential. You can't implement step number 13, then step number 8, then step number 9, and so on and so forth. It should be implemented from 1 to 13. And we say that any resolution from the Security Council for peacekeeping force or whatever should be supporting this Minsk complex of measures and not contradicting it. That's our firm and basic position. As soon as there is a solution which would respect this Minsk complex of measures, we would support such a resolution. No problem. We would support this peacekeeping force. Again, this is our proposal. It was made in September 2017, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So it's very strange to hear such things that Russia is not supportive. We do support, but we think that Minsk agreements is the only framework for resolution of the conflict on Donbass. It has very concrete, strict provisions, and they should be implemented. The other issue that they have been and are more and more questioned in Ukraine, because this is an awkward topic for some politicians, when Mr. Medvedchuk, who was and I think still representative of Ukraine during these Minsk negotiations, when he said that this would be problematic for Ukrainian authorities to implement Minsk agreements and to seek direct dialogue, which is really the only way to solve this issue. He was threatened with a criminal case. So this is very worrying. There is a clear trend to revise Minsk agreements, to question Minsk agreements in Ukraine, and the West remains either silent or supportive of such moves. But we think that there is no other alternative, even from the point of view that it is endorsed by Security Council, and not only by resolution but by a PRST that was issued last summer about this. Okay, I think that's the last question.
TRT World.
Yes, hi, Frank Isiardo from TRT World. Could you tell us about the Russian decision to deploy strategic bombers to the Crimean Peninsula, why it's necessary?
Frankly speaking, I'm not maybe following this in detail, but there is Russian military base. It existed there since I don't know how long.
Well, apparently a decision over the last few days has been made to deploy strategic bombers there. Do you know why?
First of all, I hear about it from you.
Well, RIA News Agency also reported it as well.
Okay, I don't say it's not true, but I'm not aware of this. But even if such decision is taken, which might be the case, I don't see any problems with this because of stronger and stronger presence of NATO in Black Sea. And if you read Ukrainian press, if you listen to the statements that are being made, I think you would also deploy strategic bombers or whatever to protect this territory and to guarantee that there are no provocations of any kind. So we have such a right, since this is our territory, and we do it.
Do you think it has anything to do with the deployment of U.S. strategic missiles system, anti-defensive missile systems in Romania?
You must be much better expert on military issues than I am. I'm humble diplomat here in our mission, you know. But I can't exclude such a link. You see the overall situation, which is not very, very favorable for detente, for disarmament. On the contrary, we are coming to the brink of the arms race with all this situation about INF and other treaties. So, of course, we must be vigilant, and we need to take the steps that we want and we have to take to protect our sovereignty and our territory, to avoid any provocations. At the end of our press conference, I wanted to also to show to you, and I think that most of you already have it. This is one of the media, one of the magazines about Crimea that we received recently, and we wanted to share it with you. This is very colorful, and well, I read it with big pleasure, I would say. So I recommend you to browse through it when you have free time, and to book your tickets to Crimea. This is a very nice place. This is a unique place in the world, maybe because of climate. And maybe at next press conference, maybe 1 year from now or 2 years from now, you will also join a voice to myself, telling us the story of how it is in Crimea, how do people live. We do not want to conceal this because we have nothing to regret in this regard. And we are now very rejoiceful, 5 years from this event, and we see that people in Crimea are jubilant as well, and that gives us forces to continue our politics and the way we do these things. Thank you very much, everybody, for your attention.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you.